The shuttles descended through the amber clouds of Othara 3, slicing through the atmosphere with long, pale trails that shimmered like molten glass in the morning light. The annual survival trial drew cadets from 12 species, each convinced that this year would finally prove which physiology and which tradition stood strongest. The instructors always changed one rule every season to force innovation and prevent species from relying on old tricks. This time, the rule was more shocking than usual, and the entire camp buzzed with disbelief. Fire in any form was forbidden. No flames, no sparks, no plasma, no friction heat, no portable burners, no heated stones, no artificial bioheat tools. The trial focused on food preparation, which meant every participant would need to learn how to cook something edible in a world where the soil was toxic in several regions, the wildlife was unpredictable, and many plants required heating just to purge mild toxins. When Liam Graves stepped out of his shuttle, the first thing he noticed was how every alien cadet looked at him with unmasked curiosity. He had grown used to the whispers that surrounded humans at the Multi-Species Academy. Some species admired humans for their improvisation, others thought humans were dangerously unpredictable, and a few considered humans primitive for relying so heavily on fire in almost every part of daily life. This time, the whispers carried a tone of amusement. Several cadets from the crystalline Bryn race hummed quietly, their bodies vibrating with smug confidence. They believed Liam would fail the earliest, possibly even before sunset. Bryn cadets used internal thermal cores to heat food. The ban on fire meant nothing to them. Others, like the broad-shouldered Trask warriors, carried digestive glands that could sear meat after consumption. The instructors had allowed these biological processes as long as no external flame or heater was applied. Liam had none of those advantages, and the alien cadets knew it. He ignored the stares and instead inhaled the dry, metallic scent of Othara 3's air. The landscape stretched for kilometers with gentle ridges, crumbling cliffs, and fields of tall silver grass that swayed like thin blades catching the wind. Sunlight flickered off distant mineral formations. The planet was beautiful in its quiet, harsh way. Liam found himself smiling, which only made a nearby group of cadets mutter louder. He heard a tall Erixian say that the human probably misunderstood the instructions because no human could possibly cook without fire. Liam pretended not to hear her and continued scanning the terrain. He knew the instructors would not reveal hidden hints, but he also understood that everything necessary to succeed always appeared somewhere in the environment. He simply had to find it. The primary instructor, a towering reptilian veteran named Karos, raised his staff to gather everyone's attention. His shadow stretched across the sand like a long spear. His voice boomed across the field, vibrating the metal badges pinned to each cadet's chest. He reminded everyone of the rules and repeated the fire ban 3 times. The instructors were not interested in watching species exploit their biological advantages. The purpose of the test was to measure creativity, resourcefulness, and the ability to transform constraints into opportunities. Karos spoke slowly, eyeing Liam in the middle of the group. Liam sensed that the instructor expected something from him, though he could not tell whether it was failure or innovation. After the briefing, the cadets spread out to explore the area. Some immediately began chewing raw roots, testing for edible compounds with their specialized tongues. A few others tried to warm plants using heated palms or internal biological heat pockets. Everyone worked with confidence because every species except humans had at least one method of non-flame heating. Liam felt the weight of being the only one possessing no such adaptation. Yet instead of rushing or panicking, he knelt in the dust and studied the angle of the sun, the color of the rocks, and the way the shadows moved as the wind stirred dust across the field. He traced lines along the ground with his finger, calculating which direction the sun would travel and how strong the reflection from mineral-rich stone might be in the late afternoon. He walked away from the group and climbed a ridge where the wind cut sharply across his face. He carried no tools but a small survival blade with a dull edge. Without fire, even the blade felt unhelpful, though its weight grounded his thoughts. As he reached the top, he saw the ravine he had hoped to find. It lay beneath him like a cracked jawbone, filled with broken rock formations that sparkled faintly. He slid down the slope carefully, stopping to test a stone fragment between his fingers. It caught the sunlight in a bright, concentrated flash. That was enough to make him pause. The rock had a reflective property stronger than any ordinary quartz he had seen. It reminded him of materials used in early human solar ovens. If this planet held enough of these stones, then he might not need fire at all. The universe had gifted him a natural tool. While Liam analyzed the ravine, 2 cadets watched him from afar. A Jorun female whispered that the human was probably looking for fire-starting materials, which the instructors would punish immediately. Another insisted that humans could never adapt to a world without flames. Liam heard none of this. He moved deeper, gathering samples of the reflective minerals. Some stones were too brittle, others too opaque. After several minutes of searching, he found pieces that seemed almost metallic. They bent sunlight into narrow beams that warmed his skin. He realized quickly that if he arranged these pieces into a curved surface, he could focus solar energy enough to heat food gently. It would not replace a full flame, but it might achieve enough heat to cook basic roots or soften tough fibers. That single idea sparked a cascade of possibilities. He carried several stones up the ridge and returned to the camp. The other cadets had already set up makeshift stations. A Trask cadet roasted a slab of fungus in his own thermal mouth. A Bryn cadet pressed food against her glowing chest crystal. Liam ignored these small displays of advantage. He reached a clear patch of ground and began shaping the stones into a curved bowl. He tested each angle by holding his hand above the surface. Some stones reflected too weakly, others scattered light in strange directions. It took time to achieve the right shape, and his fingers stung from the sharp edges. Eventually, he created a makeshift solar basin that more or less resembled the kind of primitive cooker he had seen in old Earth survival manuals. Several alien cadets circled around him, giggling or whispering. One asked him if he planned to blind the instructors with sunlight. Another wondered why he was wasting time with rocks when all he had to do was use his biological heat. Liam pretended to laugh along, though he felt the sting of being misunderstood. Instead of responding, he knelt beside his creation and continued adjusting the stones by millimeters until he felt the temperature rising steadily from the center. Soon he sensed a faint but noticeable warmth. The sun of Othara 3 was strong enough that a properly focused basin could act as a slow, fireless oven. By the time the sun lowered toward the afternoon peak, Liam finally placed a thick tuber he had collected earlier into the basin. The tuber was dense and normally required roasting to break down its toxic compounds. It was a dangerous choice if undercooked. The watching cadets expected it to remain raw. Liam simply folded his arms and waited, letting the sunlight and reflection do what primitive humans had once done long before any modern tech existed. As the scent of warming root drifted into the air, several cadets drifted closer. The disbelief on their faces slowly replaced the mockery. Liam did not need to say anything. The rising aroma spoke for him, and he allowed himself a small, quiet smile at the moment he realized he had already begun passing the trial. Fire was forbidden, but heat had always existed in the universe in countless forms. All he had done was remember that. The aroma of the warming tuber lingered long after Liam stepped away from the solar basin, and he could feel the shift in the atmosphere around camp. The earlier mockery died into a cautious silence, and cadets who had barely acknowledged his presence earlier now observed him with a strange mixture of suspicion and curiosity. He did not linger to enjoy it. The sun was still high, and he needed to refine his makeshift oven before evening winds disrupted the arrangement. The basin worked, yes, but it was fragile. A gust of wind or a careless footstep could scatter the stones. The trial rewarded stability as much as ingenuity, and Liam understood that an idea alone never carried someone through a survival test. Execution was what mattered. He returned to the ridge to gather more stones, moving carefully so he would not disturb the basin already cooking in the camp. The heat of the sun intensified as he descended back into the ravine, creating shimmering distortions above the reflective surfaces. He crouched and tested several fragments, picking only those that held a sharp mirrored sheen. After several trips between the ravine and his work area, he amassed enough pieces to reinforce the basin. He shaped a secondary ring of stones around the first, tilting each piece at such an angle that the energy would funnel inward. His hands became gritty from the mineral dust, and small cuts from the earlier work throbbed at his fingertips, but he ignored the discomfort. As he constructed the second ring, several cadets approached, each pretending to be passing by. A slender Harloon female stopped closest. Her translucent skin shimmered faintly with internal lights that pulsed when she spoke. She asked him why he was wasting so much energy on stones when he had already proven that the basin could warm food. Liam straightened and wiped his palm against his trouser leg. He explained that the test required not just heating food once, but producing reliable and repeated results. He needed something that would survive the evening winds of Othara 3 and retain enough structure to function the next day. The Harloon cadet blinked at him, then nodded slowly, perhaps realizing he was not improvising for a single moment of surprise, but building a system. By the time he finished reinforcing the basin, the tuber inside had softened noticeably. When he pierced it with a thin strand of sharpened grass, it slid through with minimal resistance. He lifted the tuber carefully and cut away a piece to test its texture. The bitter smell had faded, replaced by the earthy scent typical of cooked root vegetables. A few watching cadets inhaled deeply, their expressions shifting again. Liam returned the tuber to the basin to let it continue warming while he worked on a new idea. The sun would reach its strongest point later in the afternoon, and he intended to harness that peak fully. He gathered a long piece of clear plant sap he had extracted earlier from a vine-like growth. The sap formed a flexible, transparent film when stretched thin. He stretched it between two bent twigs, creating a crude lens. When he held it above the basin, sunlight focused into a brighter point. The warmth intensified almost immediately, and the tuber responded by releasing more steam. Liam exhaled slowly through his nose, pleased at the increased efficiency. He adjusted the height of the lens until the focused beam hit the center of the tuber. This way, the basin acted as a passive oven, while the lens directed concentrated heat for faster cooking. It was not perfect, but the improvement doubled the temperature inside the basin. He placed additional tubers beside the first, determined to prepare more than one portion before nightfall. As the day progressed, cadets scattered across the training grounds engaged in their own tasks. Some tested alternative food sources, others attempted to extract nutrients from local vegetation using biological adaptations. Yet more and more of them drifted near Liam's work area as the scent of warm food spread farther. Even cadets who scoffed at him earlier found reasons to walk close. Liam noticed how conversations paused whenever he adjusted a stone or bent over the basin. He kept his focus on the work, refusing to be distracted by attention. He knew from past trials that curiosity often turned into imitation, and imitation could turn into competition. If another cadet replicated his basin, the advantage would evaporate. He needed to stay ahead. The sun eventually began drifting toward a deeper orange, signaling the late afternoon window. The ridge cast longer shadows, and the air thickened with drifting dust. Liam repositioned the basin, aligning it with the descending sunlight. The lens still worked, but the changing angle required constant adjustment. He knelt beside his structure and used small bits of folded bark as wedges to improve the precision of the reflection. Each adjustment sharpened the heat until the mineral fragments shimmered like tiny mirrors. As he monitored his setup, he considered how remarkably adaptable humans were. He had grown up watching his father mend household tools with scrap materials. Nothing went to waste. Every broken object became potential. Humans, he realized, did not simply use fire. Humans created it, shaped it, tamed it. When fire vanished, humans invented substitutes. That mindset was what he brought into every survival trial. He felt no shame in relying on past human ingenuity, because the test never asked for biological advantage. It asked for invention. When the tubers finished cooking, he removed them and placed them on a flat stone to cool. Their outer skins had darkened and cracked, releasing soft steam. The scent drifted so far that even Instructor Karos lifted his head, the frills on his neck flaring with interest. Liam did not look up, but he sensed the instructor watching. The tubers cracked easily when he split them open. The inner flesh had turned from pale gray to a warm gold. Liam tested a small piece. The texture was tender, and no bitterness remained. The natural toxins had broken down completely. He handed a piece to the Harloon cadet who had lingered earlier. She accepted it cautiously, her bioluminescent veins flickering with apprehension. When she tasted it, her lights brightened in surprise. She admitted that she had never tasted anything cooked without a flame or genetic heat. Liam smiled slightly and explained that sunlight itself was ancient heat, older than any species in the academy. She nodded again and walked away slowly, glancing back at his basin as if trying to understand how something so simple could change the direction of a trial. Other cadets approached, hoping to sample the food. Liam restricted the portions, reminding himself that he needed fuel for later experiments. Still, he allowed a few small tastes. He could feel the shift in the hierarchy of perceptions. The earlier belief that he was the weakest link began to dissolve. Word spread fast in competitive environments, and soon cadets who prided themselves on their natural abilities found themselves staring at something built from nothing more than stone, sap, and sunlight. As the sun dipped lower, he tested the basin one final time, ensuring it would stay intact overnight. He anchored the stones with weighted gravel and positioned a ridge of soil along the windward side to protect the structure from gusts. When he finished, he stepped back and studied his creation in the orange light of Othara 3's sunset. The basin no longer looked like a pile of random rocks. It resembled a deliberate, engineered tool, quiet and unassuming yet powerful in purpose. Liam wiped dust from his palms and felt the fatigue in his shoulders, but he also felt a sense of growing momentum. He had solved one problem, but he knew the trial would not end with sunlight. Clouds, nightfall, and the unpredictable weather of Othara 3 would demand new answers. He would need more than one method of cooking to pass the full challenge. Yet for the moment, he allowed himself a breath of confidence. He had taken the first step, and it had been enough to unsettle an entire camp. He turned away from the basin and prepared for the next stage of the trial, unaware that by morning the sun-trap oven would become the least surprising thing he would accomplish. By dawn the next morning, the winds of Othara 3 swept across the plains with a low metallic howl. Liam woke to the sound of granules of dust tapping against the outer shell of his temporary shelter. The sky carried a muted, matte tone, as if heavy clouds hid just beyond the horizon. He stretched his arms and stepped outside, squinting at the pale light. The sun had not yet broken fully through the cloud layer, and for a long moment he wondered whether the previous day's method would work again. The solar basin remained intact, anchored by stones and reinforced soil. He crouched to check its condition. Despite a thin film of dust and a slight shift in one reflective piece, the basin looked stable. Yet the weak sunlight made it clear he would not rely on the same method today. He brushed the dust from his hands and looked toward the ravine where he had collected the reflective stones. The ravine resembled a deep scar carved into the landscape, outlined by jagged edges. He expected the mineral formations to hold moisture within their cracks, especially after the cold night. Moisture meant potential chemical reactions, and with that thought, he remembered the 2 samples of clay he had set aside the previous evening. He had collected them without any specific plan, but the texture and smell of each had been distinct enough to stay in his mind. One clay smelled metallic and gritty, while the other held a faint, sulfurous scent. At the time, he simply wanted to test their texture. Now he wondered if they could react to generate heat. He retrieved the clay samples from a flat stone where he had left them to dry slightly. The metallic clay left a dull residue on his fingertips, while the sulfurous clay felt sticky. He mixed a small amount of each on his palm and added a drop of water from his canteen. Instantly, the mixture warmed. It did not spark, nor did it produce smoke, which meant the reaction remained within the allowed rules. The heat intensified slightly before stabilizing. Liam exhaled sharply, recognizing the significance of the discovery. He did not need flames. He did not even need sunlight. If the reaction could be harnessed in a controlled space, he could create steam. He walked to a collection of flat stones and began searching for pieces that could form a small pot. After several minutes, he found a shallow stone with a natural indentation. The indentation was deep enough to hold water. He scraped the edges with his blade to smooth cracks, then inspected the underside. The stone felt dense and unlikely to fracture under moderate heat. He tested the reaction again with more clay, pressing the mixture to the bottom of the indentation. The stone warmed without cracking. It was a promising sign. Around him, the camp slowly came to life. A Trask cadet stretched his powerful arms and began inspecting plant carcasses he had collected the night before. A Jorun female sorted long strips of vegetation, muttering frustrations under her breath each time the cold air stung her fingertips. None of them paid much attention to Liam at first. He preferred it this way. Fewer eyes meant fewer interruptions, and fewer interruptions meant faster progress. He built a small circular wall from stones he carried from the ridge, creating a stable base for the pot. Once the base stood firm, he placed the stone pot on top and arranged the clay mixture beneath it in small, evenly spaced patches. Each patch would react once water touched it. The goal was to heat the pot from the bottom with controlled steam. To test the concept, he added a small amount of water to the pot. The water sat still, cold and transparent. He dripped water onto the clay beneath the pot. Instantly, the clay reacted. Warm steam rose from the bottom, heating the pot gradually. The water inside the pot rippled as the heat transferred upward. He leaned close, careful not to inhale the fumes, and observed the subtle bubbling at the base of the water. This was exactly what he needed. He stepped away and scanned the nearby vegetation until he found a cluster of circular fungus slabs growing along the ground. The fungus slabs had a rubbery texture and required steaming to become digestible. He collected several pieces and rinsed them with limited water. If the steaming method worked, he could produce a soft, edible meal. He arranged the fungus slabs inside the pot, then covered the pot with a flat stone to trap the rising steam. Within minutes, the faint smell of warming fungus filled the air. A nearby cadet, a Harloon male with pale orange veins pulsing across his skin, halted mid-step and watched. He approached Liam slowly and asked what he had built. Liam explained that he had mixed two types of clay to produce a chemical reaction. The Harloon cadet blinked, astonished that clay could serve as a heat source. The cadet stepped back, seemingly unsure whether the process was safe. Liam reassured him that the reaction remained mild and within the boundaries of the rules. It did not ignite or burn anything. It generated nothing more than controlled steam. As the minutes passed, more cadets gathered near the pot. Liam focused on maintaining the reaction by dripping water periodically onto the clay below the pot. Too much water would drown the reaction. Too little would cool it prematurely. He adjusted the amount carefully, watching the temperature rise. The cover stone vibrated faintly, indicating strong internal steam pressure. He lifted the cover slightly with his blade, letting a thin line of steam escape. The fungus slabs inside had changed color, shifting from pale gray to a deeper brown. The edges curled slightly, showing signs of softening. He replaced the cover and waited longer. The Harloon cadet from before continued watching with rapt attention. The Jorun female eventually approached as well, leaning forward to sniff the air. The aroma grew richer as the fungus softened. Liam could feel eyes on him from multiple directions, but he refused to be hurried. Precision was essential. Once he felt the fungus had steamed long enough, he removed the cover stone and lifted a slab with a piece of bark. It broke apart with minimal resistance, releasing a warm, savory smell. He tasted a small piece and nodded slowly. The texture was soft, and the flavor had mellowed. The steaming method had succeeded. He handed a piece to the Harloon cadet, who tasted it with visible caution. The cadet's bioluminescent veins brightened, signaling approval. The Jorun female sampled a small piece, her eyes widening. She asked him how he had learned to generate heat with clay. Liam explained that on Earth, early humans experimented with natural materials constantly. Clay, minerals, ashes, everything offered potential. The Joran female stared at the pot again, as if seeing it for the first time. Word spread fast, and soon even Instructor Karos approached. The instructor's towering frame cast a long shadow over the steaming pot. His frills twitched as he examined the setup. Liam expected a reprimand, but Karos simply nodded once, acknowledging the ingenuity. The instructor did not speak. He did not need to. The nod alone carried meaning. Liam continued refining the steaming method, adjusting the ratio of clay mixtures and the timing of water drips. By midday, he had a fully functional steam pot that required no flame, no sunlight, and no biological heat. He felt a steady pride growing in his chest. He had discovered a method that none of the cadets could replicate without understanding chemical principles. This advantage would carry him far, but he knew the trial still had more challenges ahead. The sky darkened gradually as clouds drifted closer, promising colder temperatures by evening. Liam studied the distant ridges and imagined what other forms of heat might be hidden within the planet itself. He had mastered the sun. He had mastered clay. Now he wondered what secrets lay buried beneath the surface of Othara 3. He dusted his hands, cleaned the pot, and prepared to seek new answers. The trial continued, and he intended to push further than anyone expected. Liam felt the temperature shift long before the sky revealed it. As midday turned toward afternoon, the air thickened with a kind of trembling warmth that did not come from the sun. The ground beneath his boots seemed to exhale faint wisps of heat, rising in thin curls that distorted the shimmering landscape. He crouched and pressed his palm to the soil. It felt warm, far too warm for ordinary daytime convection. Othara 3 had a geological pulse, and he sensed it vibrating in the layers of earth beneath him. The clouds overhead moved slowly, gathering density as if preparing to smother the sunlight completely. A wave of cold air brushed across the camp, and several cadets shivered. Yet at the same moment, the ground released a deeper, steady warmth, as if the planet itself breathed in cold and breathed out heat. He rose and scanned the terrain, studying the patterns of cracked soil stretching toward a distant ridge. The cracks did not form randomly. They curved and intersected like veins, spreading outward from a central point. He followed the largest crack, stepping lightly so his weight did not collapse loose surfaces. The crack widened as he approached the foot of the ridge, revealing narrow slivers of glowing orange far below. The glow was faint and intermittent, nothing like volcanic fire, but unmistakably geothermal. Liam felt a surge of anticipation. Heat within the earth had fed ancient human technologies long before modern igniters and controlled flame tools existed. He wondered if he could harness the warmth without violating the rules. The trial banned flame, not the natural temperature of the planet. He knelt beside the widest crack and extended his arm slowly, feeling the rising heat from the glowing vein. The warmth felt steady, gentle, and sustained. If he placed food inside the heated layers of Earth, perhaps the planet could cook it slowly. The idea felt bold, but not reckless. He remembered how early human cultures had used hot soil, volcanic vents, and thermal springs to prepare food when flames were unreliable or forbidden. No one else in the camp seemed to notice the phenomenon yet. Most cadets focused on their traditional methods, unaware that the Earth itself hid a cooking tool older than any species. He returned to camp and selected a root meat hybrid plant he had collected earlier. It resembled a thick, fibrous bundle wrapped in a natural membrane. The plant released a fragrant smell when heated, but only after several hours of slow cooking. If rushed, the fibers remained tough and nearly impossible to chew. The slow cooker method would be perfect for this ingredient. He carried the plant back to the ridge, along with a bundle of pliable leaves he planned to use as insulation. The soil near the crack felt warm enough to soften the fibers, even through layers of wrapping. Liam dug a shallow pit beside the crack, careful not to break through the fragile crust directly above the glowing vein. He lined the pit with smooth stones to distribute heat evenly. As he worked, the rising geothermal warmth brushed against his face, carrying a faint mineral scent. Once the pit was deep enough, he wrapped the root meat carefully with the large leaves, creating several protective layers. He then placed the wrapped bundle into the pit and covered it with a mix of warm soil and flat stones. The process required patience and precision. Too deep, and the heat would be lost. Too shallow, and the temperature would be uneven. While he covered the pit, footsteps approached softly behind him. He glanced back to see the Harloon female who had sampled his food the previous day. Her skin glowed faintly with curious pulses of light. She asked him what he was burying, her tone both puzzled and cautious. Liam explained that the soil carried steady geothermal warmth. She crouched beside him and extended her hand toward the ground, pulling it back quickly when she felt the heat. Her veins brightened in astonishment. She admitted she had never considered the Earth itself as a heat source. Liam told her that many places in the galaxy contained geothermal pockets, but only species familiar with primitive cooking traditions recognized their usefulness. She watched as he placed the final stone atop the mound. The Harloon cadet asked him how long the cooking would take. Liam estimated that the plant needed several hours. He explained that the slow heat would break down the fibers gradually, transforming the tough interior into something tender and flavorful. The Harloon cadet sat beside him for a moment, then quietly stood and returned to camp, leaving him alone with the buried cooker. He remained seated for a while, observing how the heat radiated subtly through the stones. He pressed his palm gently against the mound. The warmth felt perfect, steady enough to cook without burning. He felt a deep satisfaction settle into him. This method would not impress through spectacle or immediate results. It required patience, foresight, and trust in the natural rhythms of the planet. He liked that. It reflected something essential about humans. They learned from the world instead of forcing it to obey them. The afternoon wore on, and the camp buzzed with activity. Several cadets attempted to replicate Liam's steam pot, though many struggled with the delicate balance of water and clay. A few glanced toward the ridge, clearly wondering what he was doing there. Liam checked the mound every so often, adjusting loose stones or brushing away dust. As the sun began to set, the sky shifted into hues of violet and amber. The wind grew colder, yet the mound remained warm under his touch. When enough hours had passed, he began uncovering the pit. He lifted each stone carefully and brushed away the top layer of soil. The leaves surrounding the root meat had darkened slightly from the heat. A rich aroma drifted upward, earthy and sweet, mingling with the cooling air. He peeled away the first layer of leaves, exposing the softened interior of the plant. The once tough fibers separated easily with a gentle pull. Steam rose in delicate curls, carrying the scent across the ridge. He tasted a small piece. It nearly melted on his tongue. The flavor had deepened, developing a complexity he had only tasted once before while traveling with his father as a child. He felt a quiet, personal memory surface, but he let it fade. This moment belonged to the trial. The Harloon female returned first, her lights brightening at the aroma. She approached with a mix of eagerness and hesitation, as if unsure whether she should intrude. Liam offered her a piece, and she accepted it with both hands. As she tasted it, her glowing veins pulsed with soft, rhythmic waves. She whispered that the flavors felt alive in a way she had never experienced from cooked food. Liam smiled, appreciating that she understood the depth of the method. More cadets gathered soon after, drawn by the scent. One by one, they tasted small portions. Even the Trask warrior, who prided himself on searing meat with his own body heat, sampled a piece and nodded with reluctant approval. Liam noticed Instructor Karos standing at a distance, watching silently. The instructor did not approach, but his frills lifted subtly, a gesture of acknowledgement. As twilight fell and the ridge cooled, Liam covered the geothermal crack with a protective layer of soil, leaving the environment undisturbed. He carried the remaining portions of cooked food back to camp, sharing only small pieces while keeping enough for his needs. He felt a calm sense of accomplishment deep within him. He had mastered 3 completely different methods without a single flame. What had felt like an impossible challenge on the first morning now seemed like a demonstration of what humans did best, turning the impossible into a process. With night approaching and the final day of evaluation drawing near, Liam settled beside his shelter and listened to the wind as it swept across the plains. He had proven himself through ingenuity and patience, and now the instructors would decide how these achievements measured against the expectations of the trial. Yet he felt no anxiety. He had done what he came to do. The next day would speak for itself. The final morning of the trial arrived with a heavy purple sky stretching across the horizon. The air felt unusually still, as if the planet itself paused to witness the conclusion. Liam stepped out of his shelter and glanced toward the ridge where faint traces of geothermal warmth still shimmered through the cracks. He inhaled deeply and let the cold morning air settle into his lungs. The evaluation would begin shortly, and he needed to gather the results of his efforts. He checked his solar basin first, brushing away a thin layer of dust. The structure remained intact, though the stones felt cold after the long night. He picked up the tubers he had prepared earlier, now cooled but fully cooked. He wrapped them securely in a folded cloth. He then examined the steam pot, where the stones still carried a bit of warmth from yesterday's reaction. The fungus slabs he had steamed retained their soft texture. He packed them neatly in a separate cloth, making sure none of the clay residue had seeped into the food. Finally, he retrieved the remaining portion of the root meat from his geothermal cooker. The aroma was milder after cooling overnight, but still rich enough to catch attention. He wrapped it with care. These 3 dishes represented 3 different solutions, 3 arguments answering the challenge that fire was unnecessary for cooking. Beyond the camp, he saw cadets gathering near the central clearing. Some carried raw roots, others held barely warmed plants, and a few approached the instructors empty-handed. The challenge had proven more difficult than most expected. The aliens who relied on biological heating looked frustrated. The Bryn cadet, whose crystal core normally pulsed with heat, held a wilted slab of vegetation that had not softened properly. A Trask warrior with powerful thermal glands carried a piece of meat that had charred unevenly. The Harloon female, who had followed Liam's work the closest, approached with a small portion of fungus she had attempted to steam by replicating his method. Her expression carried a mix of hope and nervousness. Instructor Karos stood at the center of the clearing, tall and rigid as a carved monument. His frills glowed faintly in anticipation. The instructors formed a semicircle, each holding a stylus to mark observations. Karos raised his staff and called the cadets to form a line. Liam joined the others, placing his wrapped bundles at his feet. As he scanned the group, he noticed more glances directed his way than before. Some wary, others respectful, a few openly curious. He did not let the attention distract him. He kept his focus on the ground, waiting for the evaluation to begin. Karos first approached a Jorun cadet who presented a bundle of raw weeds. The instructor examined it briefly before noting something on his tablet. The Jorun cadet stepped back with slumped shoulders. Next came the Bryn, then the Trask, then others from various species. Each cadet received a terse comment or a silent nod before stepping aside. The tension spread through the line like a silent wave. When Karos finally reached the Harloon female, he paused longer. He observed her steamed fungus, inhaled the aroma, and tasted a small piece. His frills twitched in acknowledgement. She bowed her head slightly, encouraged by the gesture. When Caro stepped before Liam, the clearing grew unusually quiet. The instructor lowered his gaze to the 3 bundles at Liam's feet. He asked Liam to present them one at a time. Liam crouched and lifted the first bundle, the tubers from the solar heat trap. He unfolded the cloth and revealed the golden interior of the cooked root. Caros picked up a piece and examined it closely. He tasted it, and his frills fluttered with a sharp upward pulse. The other instructors murmured among themselves. Caros asked Liam how he had captured sunlight in such a controlled manner. Liam explained the arrangement of minerals, angles, and the lens made from plant sap. Caros nodded slowly, as if impressed by the harmony of simplicity and precision. Next, Liam presented the steamed fungus. He handed the pot forward, and Caros leaned in. The instructor lifted a soft piece and tested its consistency. Several cadets held their breath, waiting for his reaction. Caros tasted it and looked at Liam with an expression that could only be described as reflective curiosity. He asked Liam how he had produced heat without igniting anything. Liam explained the chemical interaction between the 2 types of clay. Caros ran a claw gently across the inside of the pot, then turned to the other instructors. One of them whispered something, another nodded slowly. Finally, Liam presented the root meat he had cooked in the earth. He unwrapped it carefully, allowing the aroma to drift upward. Even the cadets in the back of the clearing shifted forward slightly. Caros picked up a piece, rotating it slowly between his fingers. He tasted it and exhaled a long, rumbling sound, something close to satisfaction. He asked Liam how he had identified the geothermal pocket. Liam answered simply that the ground itself had revealed the heat through cracks and texture. Caros nodded again, this time with slower, deeper movement of his frills. When the evaluation of all cadets concluded, Caros returned to the center of the clearing and raised his staff. The instructors formed a line behind him. Caros declared that the trial tested creativity, adaptability, and the ability to overcome biological or environmental limitations. He spoke of the importance of observing the world rather than forcing it to conform. Then he announced that only 1 cadet had demonstrated mastery of the challenge beyond expectation. He gestured toward Liam. For a moment, Liam felt the clearing tilt into silence. The wind seemed to pause, the clouds seemed to hold their shape, and every cadet turned toward him. Caros explained that Liam's methods did not merely complete the task, they expanded the definition of what cooking could be without flame. The solar basin harnessed ancient planetary energy. The steam pot demonstrated understanding of chemistry without tools. The geothermal cooker honored a practice older than any modern species. Together, these methods formed a triad of ingenuity. As Caros spoke, the Harloon female smiled softly, her luminescent veins pulsing with pride in his success. Even the Trask warrior nodded grudgingly. A few cadets whispered to one another, not with mockery this time, but with quiet admiration. Liam felt a wave of warmth move through him, not from geothermal vents or solar heat, but from recognition. He had proven that limitations did not bind him. They challenged him. Caros commanded him to step forward. When Liam obeyed, the instructor extended a ceremonial token carved from stone. The token bore the symbol of the Survival Academy, a spiraling line representing resilience through adaptation. Caros placed the token into Liam's palm and told him that the Academy valued not only strength or biological advantage, but the ability to think beyond instinct. He said that Liam had demonstrated what humans brought to the galactic community, the spark of invention without actual flame. Liam bowed his head respectfully. The wind picked up again, swirling dust around the clearing. The moment felt grounded and complete. He had entered the trial as an outsider, and now stood as the one who had set a new benchmark. The cadets dispersed gradually, discussing the methods he had used. Some approached him with questions. Others thanked him for sharing portions of his food earlier. The Harloon female walked beside him for a brief moment and said that she had learned more from observing his work than from any instructor. He thanked her quietly. As the shuttles arrived to take the cadets back to the academy, Liam stood at the edge of the clearing and looked once more toward the ridge where the geothermal glow pulsed faintly in the shadow of the rocks. He felt gratitude for the planet, for its hidden warmth, and for the challenge that had pushed him beyond simple survival. He stepped onto the shuttle with a calm certainty. The trial had ended, but the lesson would remain with him long after he left Othara 3. The universe hid countless sources of heat, countless opportunities for invention. A human just needed to listen, watch, and work with what already existed. As the shuttle lifted into the sky, Liam felt the weight of the token in his hand. He closed his fingers around it and allowed himself a rare, full smile. He had not just passed a trial. He had honored the craft of human resilience, proof that fireless cooking, like countless other innovations, lived not in tools or flames, but in the mind willing to create them.